Welcome, everyone, to the Ready for the Draft podcast. I am your host, Gregg Schutze. This is the first episode, that's right, episode 1 of the 2023 podcast series where we take a look at the draft-eligible prospects and get you ready for the NFL draft. After a couple of months enjoying the summer, college football is right around the corner. That's right. As of this taping on Sunday, July 31st, we've got 27 days until the start of the college football season. That's right. The full slate of college football games doesn't really technically start until Labor Day weekend, but we will get some games starting on Saturday, August 27th. We're going to break down that weekend as well as that full slate. Who are the players that you should be keeping an eye out for? But this is really kind of an introductory to the 2023 draft class, really taking a look at each of the positions. We're going to talk through, do a position by the position breakdown. But really what I want to do is kind of start off. We're going to talk about the offense here in the first podcast, and then in the second podcast we'll talk defense before actually doing the positional breakdowns. Then we'll get into talking about the different conferences and then the actual matchups for that first week. So when we look at last year's draft, we talk about narratives. That's one of the things, if you've listened to the Ready for the Draft podcast at all, we talk about narratives and what was the narrative for the 2022 NFL draft. Well, obviously it was defense, right? You look at defense, and we had 5 defensive players taken in the top 5 picks. So, Travon Walker going number 1 overall to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Everyone was expecting it to be Aiden Hutchinson for the longest time. Then Travon Walker really got that momentum. Ultimately, Trent Baalke gets his guy there at 1. Aiden Hutchinson going to the Lions at number 2. A pair of cornerbacks come off the board at 3 and 4. Third straight season, we've actually seen corners come off the board. 2 of them in the top 10. We'll talk about that in episode 2 of the podcast series. But Derek Stingley, Ahmad Gardner, both coming off the board there. And then Kayvon Thibodeaux coming off the board at number 5. You get the edge rusher, another pass rusher there for the Giants. So we're used to seeing quarterbacks taken in the top 5. So the fact that we had so many defensive players taken there, that really spoke to the lack of depth there at that quarterback position. Really at the top of the draft, only Kenny Pickett taken in round number 1 to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And this was the first time that we actually had a quarterback that was not taken in the top 3 since 2013 when E.J. Manuel went number 16 overall to the Buffalo Bills. Now, you remember that quarterback class really did not pan out. We had the likes of Geno Smith, Mike Glennon, Matt Barkley, Ryan Nassib, Tyler Wilson, and Landry Jones, all taken in the first 4 rounds of the draft. Here's to hoping that Pickett, Desmond Ridder, Malik Willis, Matt Corral, Bailey Zappi, and Sam Howell have a different narrative than that 2013 class. This season, there's no question who's at the top. CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, they'll be doing battle as the top quarterback taken. They may or may not be the first overall pick. We've got a guy by the name of Will Anderson Jr. who would have been the number 1 overall pick had he been draft eligible. To me, he looks a lot like what Derek Thomas was able to do there at Alabama with the Crimson Tide. So if there's a team that does not need a quarterback sitting at number 1 overall, then CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, chances are you're probably coming off the board 2 and 3. But look, Bryce Young, the Heisman Trophy winner, we know that he's a little undersized, 6 foot 194, but over 4,800 yards on 66.9% passing, 47 touchdowns, just 7 interceptions. Such an intelligent passer. That was the thing. The fact that he was small didn't mean a whole lot because he had the arm strength to throw to all 3 of the levels, being able to throw not only vertically, but be able to throw the ball with accuracy outside the numbers, but just the intelligence, the anticipation, the ball placement, just mature beyond his years. Then you have CJ Stroud, 4th in the Heisman voting, 6'3", 215, the redshirt sophomore, over 4,400 yards through the air for the Buckeyes, 71.9% passing, 44 touchdowns, just 6 interceptions. These 2 will be doing battle to see who that number 1 quarterback is going to be coming off the board. And it's going to be interesting. Look, CJ Stroud loses Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, still has Jaxon Smith Njigba, who we'll be talking about here in a minute. You also have Julian Fleming and Emeka Egbuka, and a guy by the name of Marvin Harrison Jr. on that team as well. So a lot of receiver weapons. When you look at Alabama, obviously when you talk about the Bama receiving core, you've got Justin Harrell, the speedster coming out of Louisville. You also have Jermaine Burton coming over from Georgia, SEC rival. Slides right on into that receiver position. Gone is Jamison Williams and all of that production that he brought. You also get a running back in Jahmyr Gibbs, the transfer from Georgia Tech. So a lot of weapons there for Bryce Young as well. It's really going to be interesting to see what happens there at the top of the draft come April. But who's going to be number 3? That's going to be the big question mark. We know who the top 2 are going to be. Number 3, really when we look at the rest of this draft class, it reminds me somewhat of this past year in the 2022 draft with a lot of question marks. Now, I think there's a more talented group this year, but still, we've got question marks in this group, and so it's really hard to really pinpoint who's going to be that guy. We've got Will Levis out of Kentucky. If you've been on social media at all, you know this is the guy that loves to take his coffee with mayonnaise. Coffee with mayo, I don't know about that, but look, the kid, good size, strong arm, but questionable decision making at times. Needs to cut down on the interceptions. Had 13 a season to go with those 24 touchdowns. Also, Wan'Dale Robinson no longer there. He's going to have to establish a connection with the new go-to receiver, Tyler Van Dyke. Big kid as a redshirt freshman there for Miami, 6-3 as a starter, but look, 5-1 to close out the year. 66% passing, over 2,100 yards, 365 yards through the air, just with 20 touchdowns and just 3 interceptions. I think he needs to improve some of his decision making at times, being able to see the entire field. But he's one of those guys that I see having, if he has a big year, we could see him making that conversation there, really interesting at that number 3 spot. Then there's Devin Leary out of NC State. Only NC State quarterback, including Phillip Rivers, Russell Wilson, to actually throw 4 touchdowns against 5 ACC opponents and 3 consecutive games with 4 touchdown passes against ACC opponents. Consistent ball placement, I think, for him. Also needs to work on the touch at times. Not everything needs to be a fastball. Make sure that you have some of that touch, get more air under the ball, allow his receivers to run under the football on a consistent basis. Then you've got Anthony Richardson. Look, I think scouts are salivating over this guy. 6'4", 226 pounds, very athletic there out of Florida. Great size, very athletic, but also very green. Needs to develop as a quarterback, the decision-making, see the whole field, understand situational football. He reminds me a lot of Malik Willis. There was all that hype about Willis and the athleticism and the arm strength and all of that. But at the end of the day, when you talk about his play on the field, Anthony Richardson, like Willis, has a long way to go. Then there's Utah's Cameron Rising. If you were to see this guy with his helmet off, he looks like he belongs in Pirates of the Caribbean with that pirate stash, but don't let that fool you. Dual threat quarterback, took the Pac-12 by storm in his first season under center. Can he build upon that Rose Bowl performance and saw him complete 77% of his passes against the Buckeyes through 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 92 yards on the ground with a touchdown as well. Cam Rising, another guy to keep an eye on there. I could see he and Tyler Van Dyke really moving up and surpassing some of these guys. Look, everybody's been talking about Will Levis. Everyone's talking about Anthony Richardson. Those are 2 guys in Van Dyke and Rising to really keep an eye on throughout the season. Then there's Phil Dracovic. Is this guy the next Big Ben? Big, strong, physical guy there in the pocket. He's finally healthy, needs to have a big year to really elevate his status. And then, of course, we have Keaton Slovis and Spencer Rattler. Both have new homes, moving on from USC and OU, respectively, to Pittsburgh and South Carolina. I think that's really going to be interesting to really see how all of that plays out. And then athletic SEC quarterbacks. You got Hendon Hooker. You got KJ Jefferson. Look, KJ Jefferson has that gimmicky offense where they like to have him run the football a ton. Really want to see him develop as a quarterback. Can he make that move? That's going to be interesting to watch. But look, much like Coastal Carolina's Grayson McCall, when you look at Coastal Carolina, the Chanticleers offense and the option that they run, and it's really interesting. They've got that option and the spread, that combo look. It's really interesting, kind of unorthodox somewhat there, especially at the FBS level. Average arm strength, but a guy who does a great job running that offense. I just don't know if that's going to translate to the next level. You have to consider Jaron Hall there at BYU needs to have a big leap, though, there at that quarterback position. And don't sleep on Brennan Armstrong at Virginia. This is a guy, if he can stay healthy, have a big year, especially with those talented wideouts that he has there. I think we could be talking about Brennan Armstrong moving up some draft boards. So that's kind of the situation at the quarterback spot. We move on to running backs. No running backs taken in round number 1 in 2022, though Breece Hall, the 4th pick in the 2nd round, already looks like he may be well on his way to having a big rookie year with the Jets. Early on in training camp has looked great. This year, we expect at least one running back to be taken in round 1 in Texas is Bijan Robinson. Over 1,100 yards on the ground before a dislocated elbow against Kansas cut his season short. Look, against OU, Texas scored 28 points in the first quarter, and really, OU could not stop Robinson. But the Longhorns really went away from that, especially when Caleb Williams was making his run. Had they stuck with Bijan Robinson, man, they should have won that game. Quinn Ewers, Xavier Worthy, Jordan Whittington, Jaleel Billingsley, I know you're going to fall in love with that passing attack with all of those weapons, but at the end of the day, that offense really should run through Bijan Robinson. Moving on from him, Jahmyr Gibbs, I mentioned him, the transfer from Georgia Tech. And look, with the Ramblin' Wreck, he was an all-purpose back. This dude could also return kicks, and you see that with the way that he runs the football. So explosive, the start and stop, the ability to put his foot in the ground, cut on a dime. He's just a different dynamic than what Brian Robinson brought to the Crimson Tide a season ago. Zach Evans going to bring speed and physicality to the SEC as a transfer from TCU to Ole Miss. Look, Lane Kiffin, he's talked about NIL deals, talked about the transfer portal. He's got Jackson Dart at quarterback, Michael Trigg at tight end, also has Zach Evans there to kind of lead things with that offense. Jonathan Mingo is going to be very happy as well at that receiver position. Tank Bigsby, a staple there in the SEC, so fun to watch. Bo Nix out, Zach Calzada battling TJ Finley for the job. We should see a big dose of Tank Bigsby. If I'm Auburn, I lean on Tank as much as I can, at least early on, because this is a talented running back, a guy who can catch the football out of the backfield as well. Over 1,000 yards on the ground, 10 touchdowns. I expect a big season out of him. And look, not just him, but how about Sean Tucker? Just under 1,500 yards as a sophomore. Excellent vision. You see his ability, especially in the outside zone, following those blockers, the vision to be able to set up those blocks as well, and then the explosiveness to get down the field. And that forward lean between the tackles as well. 6'9", 60 meter speed from the track team as well. But look, if we talk about speed, then you have to talk about Devon Achane. 6.63, 60 meters. 10.14, 100 meter speed. 20.2, 200 meter speed. So when you're talking about that, I mean, that's world-class speed that we're talking about here. I mean, he could sit there if he really wanted to train. He could be an elite sprinter in the world of track and field. But when you're looking at him, you talk about it, 7.4 career yards per carry, 910 yards in 2021, and that's with sharing the backfield with Isaiah Spiller. Now it's his time. And look, he's not the biggest guy, I know that, but look, neither was Travis Etienne. Came off the board at round 1 to the Jacksonville Jaguars. We know Etienne, he was the guy there at Clemson and so explosive, but Devon Achane has a chance to really make a name for himself there at A&M and has a chance to really sneak up draft boards, potentially make his way into round number 1 because you just can't teach that type of speed. Zach Charbonnet, breakout season his first year with the Bruins, gives you power, quick feet between the tackles, while Travis Dye, over 1,200 yards on the ground, 46 receptions with the Ducks. He's now at USC, where Lincoln Riley's going to bring with him that counterplay where they pull that tackle and guard. I love Travis Dye in that type of an offense. Expect those crosstown rivals to lead the Pac-12 group of running backs with Utah's Tavion Thomas. Look, a bigger back, 6'2", 221, over 1,100 yards in his first year since his move from Cincinnati. Those will be the three-headed monster out on the West Coast for sure. Then there's a diminutive Deuce Vaughn. Is he the next Darren Sproles? I mean, look, this dude is so tiny, yet so powerful, and then the explosiveness as well. He's a versatile weapon there, plus the big backs. Chris Rodriguez in the SEC, Mohamed Ibrahim coming back from injury in the Big Ten. They should be fun to watch. And you can't forget another running back from Georgia. I think every year it seems like we've got one or two running backs that'll be entering the draft. Latest was James Cook. Now we're talking about Kenny McIntosh. He's ready for his turn there with the Bulldogs. Wide receivers. We mentioned that there were 6 wide receivers taken in the first 16 picks. Drake London, Garrett Wilson taken in the top 10. Saints and Lions then trade up to snag Chris Olave and Jameson Williams in 11 and 12. Washington, not to be outdone, trades up to number 16 overall. They get Jahan Dotson. So you're looking at that 6 receivers in the top 16 picks. Really, what is going to be in store for this 2023 class of wide receivers? I see 3 bona fide first rounders. No question about that. The first one for me is Jaxon Smith Njigba. Look, 95 receptions, 1,600 yards, 9 touchdowns last season as a number 3 weapon for CJ Stroud. And if you ask Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, they'll tell you he was the most explosive weapon in that receiving core. But again, he did do much of the damage from the slot. So where's he going to line up this season? Can he continue to dominate like he did against Utah in that Rose Bowl? No Olave, no Wilson, no problem. 15 catches, 347 yards, 3 touchdowns. Utah knew what was coming at him, still couldn't stop him. That's what I said about Drake London entering the 2022 draft cycle. You know, with Drake London, teams knew that he was USC's offense during that 2021 college football season, and yet they could not stop him. The only thing that stopped him was that ankle injury. He was well on his way to becoming the Biletnikoff Award winner with just all the production that he was showing out there. I'm looking for big things out of Drake London there with the Atlanta Falcons. And speaking of the Biletnikoff Award, it actually went to Jordan Addison there at Pittsburgh. 100 receptions, just under 1,600 yards, 17 touchdowns. That's with Mark Whipple as the offensive coordinator. Kenny Pickett at quarterback. We know Pickett's now with the Steelers. Mark Whipple moved on to Nebraska. Jordan Addison now in Lincoln Riley's offense with Caleb Williams at quarterback there at USC. Expect fireworks in LA with Addison and company. Going to be interesting to see how he plays. Can we expect another explosive season out of him? I think odds right now, if you shake up the Magic 8 ball, it's going to say signs point to yes. Kayshon Boutte, 6 foot, 190 pounds, played in only 6 games in 2021 before an ankle injury knocked him out of action. Second ankle surgery kept him out of spring practice. When he went down with that ankle injury, he had 9 touchdowns, which was leading the nation. The rest of the team, just 8 total touchdowns. And to end that freshman year, 300 yards at the end of the season. This dude runs a 4.37 40, right around there. So another guy, very explosive. Expect big things from him there at LSU. So those are our 3 that I really see at the top of the draft. So then the question is going to be, who's next? Who could be this year's Jahan Dotson? You look at OU's Marvin Mims with his 22 yards per reception from a season ago. North Carolina's Josh Downs, 101 catches, over 1,300 yards receiving, catching passes from Sam Howell. Both of those guys are under 6 feet tall, both explosive playmakers down the football field. Bigger wideouts. We've got those too. A.T. Perry, Quentin Johnston, Cedric Tillman, all at least 6'3", all looking to crash the party in the first round. Then look, A.T. Perry went over 1,000 yards as a weapon on the outside for Sam Hartman there at Wake Forest. Big play threat. Keep an eye out for him. Cedric Tillman, 215 pounds, a physical receiver, went over 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns. We'll also have his quarterback coming back in Hendon Hooker, dropping in those deep balls down the football field. While then there's Quentin Johnston out of TCU. Look, he's 6'4", he's big, he's physical, not used as often as you'd expect there in the Horned Frogs offense. Still over 19 yards per reception. Johnston actually had 52 more yards through his first 2 seasons than Drake London, who wound up blowing up in 2021, dedicated solely to football. He was a two-sport star with basketball, solely focused on football. We saw what happened with Drake London. Could we see something similar in Fort Worth with Johnston? It remains to be seen, but I think everybody now in the Big 12 knows that's going to be a guy to keep an eye out for. Max Duggan, though, you got to feed him the ball early and often. 50-50 balls, man, he eats those for lunch. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out as well with some of those bigger receivers. Look, Maryland. You don't think of Maryland and Virginia, for that matter, as two teams with dynamic receiving options necessarily. Those aren't the programs that necessarily come to mind. But Raheem Jarrett and Dante Demas, they're at Maryland. Demas coming off the leg injury. You've got an explosive duo there. UVA, I mentioned Brandon Armstrong's a guy to keep an eye out for. You've got Dontavian Wicks, Keaton Thompson. Look, Keaton Thompson, wears number 99. He does a little bit of everything, a former quarterback as well. They're a dynamic 1-2 punch there for Armstrong. Going to be fun to watch for the Cavaliers. And then I think you have to look at Zay Flowers, especially with a healthy Phil Dracovic. And obviously, without Jahan Dotson there in Happy Valley, you've got Parker Washington, who's going to look to step up his game with Sean Clifford at the helm one more time, running it back again for the Nittany Lions there at quarterback. A lot of talented wideouts there at that wide receiver position. Really want to see where things kind of fall as we head into the season. A lot of promise, but really right now I see three guys that I feel confident in being first-round picks. The other guys, I really want to see them elevate their game. Josh Downs, I think, might be that number 4 guy that sneaks into that first round as well. We'll see how it plays in after that. Tight end position, we know no tight ends were taken in the first round. That was the second time in 3 years. But we had 18 tight ends, the most since 19 tight ends were taken in 2015 when Max Williams was the first tight end taken with the 55th overall pick in round number 2. Trey McBride, also the 55th overall pick, taken in round number 2. So interesting with that dynamic there, 2015 and the 2022 tight end classes. Now I think depth again is going to be the position this year with several athletic tight ends. I think the most complete though, at least right now, is Michael Mayer out of Notre Dame. A good blocker, also racked up 840 receiving yards. But beyond him, again, a lot of guys that I expect to have big years. Sam Laporta out of Iowa, yet another NFL prospect for the tight end position to come out of Iowa. A big target, developed strong chemistry with the quarterback Spencer Petras. Petras really needs to be more consistent there at the quarterback position. That's why I didn't mention him when we were talking quarterbacks. Really want to see him progress if he's going to be in that conversation as a draftable quarterback. Cameron Latu came to Alabama as a linebacker before switching to tight end in 2019. Was mainly a reserve until a breakout 2021 season that saw him really take that tight end spot away from Jaleel Billingsley. 410 yards through the air, 8 touchdowns for Latu. Expect big things. More chemistry being built there with him and Bryce Young. Now, speaking of Jaleel Billingsley, made some spectacular catches, even hit the 100-yard mark this past season against Southern Miss, but fell out of favor at Alabama, got in Nick Saban's doghouse, looking for a change of scenery in Texas with Steve Sarkisian catching passes from Quinn Ewers, also a transfer that came in there from Ohio State. Will be interesting to see how he's used in that offense, that athleticism. Especially if he runs a really fast 40 time, you could be talking about a guy that could sneak in to that first round consideration, a la Evan Ingram. I just worry about what's going on between the ears. Why did he fall out of favor there at Alabama? I think that's the red flag that's worth looking into if I'm an NFL executive. Cameron Rising at Utah. He's got not one but 2 tight ends to really talk about it. Dalton Kincaid and Brant Kuithe. Now look, with Kuithe, veteran, well-known commodity in the Pac-12. He's undersized, 6'2", 230 pounds, already over 22 years of age. But then you've got Kincaid, finished his first full season with the Utes in 2021, scored a touchdown in 5 of his final 6 games of the season. Very exciting there in the Pac-12. But look, Pac-12 tight ends, they don't end in Salt Lake City. Oregon State, they've got 6'6" Luke Musgrave. Stanford, they've got 6'5" Ben Urasek. Now Musgrave, better blocker of the 2. Should see more time as the top tight end now that Tegan Catoriano's moved on. Urasek provided a downfield threat for Tanner McKee and company there at that quarterback position. 658 yards through the air. Had a 2-game stretch where he had 11 receptions for 217 yards and a touchdown. Are we looking for a dynamic playmaker in the mold of Kyle Pitts at this tight end position? You're not going to find the physical freak that is Kyle Pitts, but you do have a guy by the name of Jaheim Bell at South Carolina who's probably the closest thing in this draft class. He and Eric Gilbert. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Eric Gilbert. When you look at Jaheim Bell, he is undersized at 6'3", 230 pounds. So again, not the physical freak that Kyle Pitts is. But look, he put a stamp, Bell did, put that stamp on his collegiate landscape with his performance in the Duke's Mayo Bowl. 5 catches, 159 yards. That's 31.9 yards per reception and 2 touchdowns. That included, those 2 touchdowns, 2 60-plus yard TD receptions in the first quarter of that game. And I mentioned Eric Gilbert. Look, he sat out the 2021 season due to personal reasons, transfer from LSU. Can be explosive, be a playmaker there for the Bulldogs. And oh yeah, the Bulldogs, they've got a trio of tight ends. Look, Brock Bowers is going to be the top tight end prospect in next year's draft. It's crazy he's only a sophomore. What he did as a freshman, unreal. But you do have 6'7" Darnell Washington. I think he's going to play the entire season. Matchup nightmare. Just throw the ball up. 50-50 ball really becomes 80-20 when you're throwing the ball to a guy as big as Darnell Washington is. We go back to the Big Ten here for a second. Michigan's Eric All, expected to be a key weapon in that offense. Balled out against Michigan State. 10 catches, 98 yards in that game. He'll be another tight end to keep an eye out for in Big Ten play. Now we move to that offensive line. And here's, when you think about that offensive line, there have been known commodities. People that we've talked about, people that we've really built up, that conversation in terms of their draft stock. 2019, it was Jonah Williams. 2020, Andrew Thomas, Jedrick Wills, Mekhi Becton, Tristan Wirfs, all very known commodities. 2021, Penei Sewell, Rashawn Slater. We were talking about Rashawn Slater and what he did to Chase Young the entire season, and he didn't even play that 2020 college football season. Then in 2022, Ikem Ekwonu, Evan Neal, Charles Cross. Charles Cross, we were talking about him, that redshirt freshman season. Ike Ekwonu, the physicality. Evan Neal have been a known commodity there at Bama. What do we have in this year's draft class at that offensive line position? Again, a lot of talent, but a lot of guys that have just started to emerge, and really it's going to depend on this 2022 college football season to really see how this offensive line shakes out. We kind of knew the roadmap going into some of the past seasons. This one we're really going to have to kind of build on the fly. Now, we talk about the talent. You got Paris Johnson, played right guard, started all 13 games a season ago, was the number 7 overall player, 5-star recruit in 2020. He gets first crack at left tackle there for the Buckeyes. Keep an eye out for Paris Johnson. Expect big things from him. Peter Skoronski, undersized like Rashawn Slater there at Northwestern, looking for a signature game like Slater did that really proves he belongs at left tackle despite being undersized. A lot of people, much like they did with Slater, tried to put Skoronski at guard. I want to see what he could do at that left tackle position, put him against some of these elite pass rushers, and see what Skoronski can do. If he can hold up, he might be one of those guys that sneaks into that middle of the first round, much like Slater did. Jalen Duncan, veteran left tackle there at Maryland, 27 starts. Excellent footwork for a guy who's 6'6", 320 pounds. Big fan of his. Connor Gallivan, Big 12 Offensive Lineman of the Year, 37 starts under his belt. Carter Warren at Pittsburgh, high-level left tackle, over 20 starts to his credit as well. Now blocking the blind slide of Keaton Slovis. Anton Harrison, big dude, big physical, but also very flexible. Movement skills are off the charts. You saw that, especially when he was getting out and pulling in those run game, the run scheme there for Lincoln Riley. Now in Jeff Levy's offense, really want to see what Anton Harrison could do, potentially elevate his game. Zion Nelson, up and down 2021 season, made the right move coming back. Now he's being coached by Mario Cristobal. Physicality is really what Mario Cristobal preaches. Expect a big season out of Zion Nelson. Blake Freeland out of BYU, a very easy mover. Reminds me of Brady Christensen in the fact that they need to work on that lower half. Get stronger, more power. And I think of Jackson Kirkland of Washington as well. 6'8", struggles with leverage and power. This was a guy very light on his feet, like Freeland. They struggle with that leverage, struggle with power for being as tall as they are. They really need to work on getting that lower body together and really work on pad level. This year's Mammoth offensive tackle, he's not as big as Daniel Fa'alele, the 6'8", 400-pounder, but you've got DeJuan Jones out of Ohio State, the right tackle, 6'8", 350 pounds, a guy that we could probably see there in that day 2 consideration. Really want to see if he can elevate his game as well. But it's not just about the tackles. We also have to talk about the guards. And when you look at the guards, I think the theme over the last couple of years with the guards that have been taken in round number 1 is versatility. You look at Alaijah Vera-Tucker in 2021, played guard and tackle at USC. Kenyon Green, Zion Johnson, Cole Strange. The first 2, both tackle and guard at A&M and Boston College. Then you have Cole Strange out of Chattanooga. Could play tackle, most likely going to be a guard or a center. And look, Bill Belichick, kind of a strange pick in round 1, but at the end of the day, he fits Belichick's scheme so well. So when you're looking at it, when you're looking at the player, you're looking at the fit, I can see why Belichick pulled the trigger there. When you talk about this group, I think the first guy that you have to start talking about, especially when you look at Alaijah Vera-Tucker, Andrew Vorhees out of USC, 6'6", 320 pounds, starting left guard, but like AVT, filled in at left tackle, showed elite movement skills. Another big season could vault him into day 1 consideration, much like Vera-Tucker saw. Osiris Torrance, Mammoth Road Grader, following Billy Napier from Louisiana to Florida. Want to see how he handles that step up in competition. I look at him, I look at Ed Ingram, was a second-round road grader there out of LSU. I think Osiris Torrance could follow in his footsteps there. When you look at the rest of this crop, a lot of it is tackles that really project to the guard position. I look at Nick Broeker out of Mississippi, Cooper Beebe out of Kansas State. Both play left tackle, but could project inside at guard. Garner day 2 consideration there. Broeker is a senior, Beebe only a junior, but could decide to come out depending on that draft stock. Could we also expect Jordan McFadden, Braden Daniels, Broderick Jones, Ryan Hayes to do the same? Only Braden Daniels saw time at guard, but the first 3 that I mentioned, McFadden, Daniels, and Jones, undersized for the tackle position, while Ryan Hayes struggles with speed, could slide inside to guard at the next level, really take advantage of some of that physicality. If nothing else, he's going to probably have to move over to that right side. That conversation, especially with Jordan McFadden, he's only 6'2", 310 pounds. Is he in the same mold of a Peter Skoronski where he's going to have to prove, hey, am I like an Isaiah Wynn, or is it going to make more sense to kick him inside to guard? Braden Daniels, Broderick Jones, I think you're probably having that conversation. These guys could wind up being tackles at the next level, but I really have them slotted as potential guards. One other offensive lineman to keep in mind is Robert Scott Jr. out of Florida State. Tackle, guard, probably more of a tackle at the next level. He'll be another guy to keep an eye out for as well. Then we move to the middle of that offensive line, the center position. That's right, the pivot. 2022, it was all about Tyler Linderbaum, right? We talked about short arms. Is he going to be a first-round pick or not? Elite athleticism, elite playmaker, intelligent player. 25th overall pick in the draft. Do we have a guy like him in this draft? The answer really is no, which means in all likelihood we probably won't see a center drafted in round number 1, right? Well, that remains to be seen, because I think with Tyler Linderbaum, you're talking about the lack of length. Jarrett Patterson, John Michael Schmitz, don't have to worry about that. These guys are much longer, much taller players than Linderbaum was. In the case of Jarrett Patterson, though, you're talking about injuries. 34 starts to his credit, really anchored that Notre Dame offensive line. But look, Liz Frank injury in mid-November against Boston College kind of messed up his season. Then had that torn pec in the weight room during the offseason, but should be ready to go come week 1 for the Irish. Then John Michael Schmitz. Look, this was a high-powered offense that PJ Fleck had there with the Golden Gophers. A lot of offensive linemen that were talented there between Fa'alele, Samuel Schluter, Blaze Andrews, but the guy that was the glue was John Michael Schmitz there in the middle. 23 starts, really anchored that position, that veteran offensive line. He was really the anchor. You look at Cedric Van Pran out of Georgia, a 3-year starter. You've got the physical TCU Horned Frog, Steve Avila. Ricky Stromberg's a 4-year starter for Arkansas. Then you've got Olusegun Oluwatimi, the transfer from Virginia. Alex Forsythe and Jake Renfro, maybe the best players on veteran offensive lines for Oregon and Cincinnati, respectively. Then you've got Grant Gibson, the easy mover from NC State. Powerhouse Brett Nealon out of USC to round out the group at the top of that center spot. Look, we didn't see a ton of centers taken, only 6 this past season, but I think we could see a change there. There are a lot of talented centers in this group, so I think you could see 8 or 9 centers drafted when we get to draft time in April. So that's a look at the offense, some of the names to really start being familiar with. We're going to break down the offense a little bit more position by position, really talk about my early top 10, really the guys to keep an eye out for. But episode 2, we'll be talking about the defense. We're going to make that transition. We'll be talking about the defensive line. Obviously, we know that there were 4 defensive ends taken in 2021, another 5 in 2022. We know 3 taken in the top 5. What does that look like at the defensive end position? Myles Murphy, Isaiah Foskey, are going to headline that group. Defensive tackles, we know about Jordan Davis and Devontae Wyatt, but another Georgia Bulldog is going to take center stage there. Look, Clemson, with their defensive line, you could have 4 defensive linemen drafted coming out of Clemson. So keep an eye out there for the Clemson Tigers. Linebackers, obviously we know about Will Anderson, but we're going to have that conversation about not only the edge rushers, but then also the inside backers. What does that look like? Who are we going to be seeing? A lot of guys came off the board on day 2, both at the edge rush position there on the outside linebacker, along with the inside backers as well. Who's going to be in that next crop here for the 2023 draft? Cornerbacks, I mentioned 2 corners in the top 10 in each of the last 3 seasons. I think we've got a couple of guys that could be knocking on the door there as well. And then the safety position. Then we had 3 safeties taken in round number 1. Are we going to see that happen again? In all likelihood, probably not. But we do have a talented group of guys, some ball hawks, some big physical guys there on the back end, some versatility as well. So a lot that we're going to get to cover. I'll make sure to put that podcast out here in the next couple of days, and then from there we'll start attacking each position. We'll go quarterbacks, running backs, through the offense, transition to the defense, and that should set us up for the beginning of the college football season. So I hope you've enjoyed the content so far. We're going to go ahead and end things for now, but for ReadyForTheDraft.com, this has been the Ready for the Draft podcast. I've been your host, Gregg Schutze. College football season's right around the corner. I hope you are as excited as I am. Have a great week, everyone. Take care, and until next time, I am out of here.